The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the small town. The streets were quiet, with only a few people walking around. Among them was a young woman in her late 20s, dressed in a sharp business suit. She had just finished a long day at work and was heading to her car. Her heels clicked against the pavement, echoing in the stillness of the evening. She was known in the town as someone who was ambitious, driven, and always focused on her career. But tonight, something unexpected was about to happen that would change her life forever. As she approached her car, she noticed a man standing near the parking lot. He was tall, wearing a military uniform, and had a calm demeanor. He seemed to be waiting for someone. The woman didn't think much of it at first. She was tired and just wanted to get home. But as she got closer, she felt a strange unease. Something about the man's presence made her uncomfortable, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. She reached her car and fumbled with her keys, trying to unlock the door. Just as she was about to open it, the man took a step toward her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said in a polite but firm voice. "Do you have a moment?" The woman froze. Her heart started to race. She didn't know this man, and she wasn't sure what he wanted. "I'm in a hurry," she replied, trying to sound confident. "What do you need?" The man hesitated for a moment, then said, "I just wanted to ask if you could spare some change. I'm a soldier, and I'm trying to get back to my base. I'm a bit short on cash." The woman's eyes narrowed. She had heard stories about people pretending to be soldiers to scam others. She wasn't sure if this man was telling the truth, and her instincts told her to be cautious. "I don't carry cash," she said curtly, hoping he would leave her alone. But the man didn't move. He stood there, looking at her with a calm expression. "I understand," he said. "But if you could help in any way, I'd really appreciate it." The woman's unease grew. She felt trapped, and her mind started to race. She didn't know what to do. Without thinking, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small handgun. She pointed it at the man, her hands trembling. "Stay back," she shouted. "I don't know who you are, but I'm not giving you anything." The man's eyes widened in shock. He raised his hands slowly, showing that he meant no harm. "Ma'am, please," he said calmly. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just need some help." But the woman wasn't listening. Her fear had taken over, and she couldn't think clearly. "I said stay back," she yelled again, her voice shaking. "I'll shoot if I have to." The man took a step back, still keeping his hands raised. Okay, he said softly. "I'm leaving. Please, just put the gun down." But before the woman could respond, a loud voice interrupted them. "What's going on here?" It was a police officer who had been patrolling the area. He had heard the commotion and rushed over to see what was happening. The woman turned to the officer, still holding the gun. "This man was trying to rob me," she exclaimed, her voice filled with panic. The officer looked at the man in the military uniform, then back at the woman. "Ma'am, please lower the weapon," he said firmly. "Let's talk about this." The woman hesitated, but eventually, she lowered the gun. Her hands were still shaking, and she could feel the weight of what she had just done sinking in. The officer approached her carefully, taking the gun from her hand. "Are you okay?" he asked. The woman nodded, but she couldn't speak. She felt a mix of emotions, fear, guilt, and confusion. She had never done anything like this before, and she didn't know how things had escalated so quickly. The officer turned to the man in the uniform. "Is what she said true?" he asked. The man shook his head. "No, sir," he replied. "I was just asking for some help. I didn't mean to scare her." The officer sighed, realizing that this was a misunderstanding. He turned back to the woman. "Ma'am, I understand you were scared, but pulling a gun on someone is a serious matter. This man is a soldier, and he wasn't trying to harm you." The woman's face turned pale. She felt a wave of guilt wash over her. I didn't know," she stammered. "I thought he was trying to rob me." The officer nodded. "I get that, but you need to be careful. You could have hurt someone, or worse. I'm going to have to take you in for questioning." The woman's heart sank. She knew her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. As the officer led her to his car, she glanced back at the soldier. He was still standing there, looking at her with a mix of sadness and understanding. She wanted to say something, to apologize, but the words wouldn't come. As they drove to the police station, the woman's mind was racing. She thought about her career, her reputation, and how this one moment of fear could ruin everything she had worked for. She had always been so careful, so focused on her goals. But now, all of that seemed to be slipping away. When they arrived at the station, the woman was taken to a small room for questioning. The officer asked her to explain what had happened, and she told him everything. She admitted that she had overreacted and that she regretted her actions. The officer listened carefully, then told her that she would likely face charges for pulling a gun on someone without just cause. The woman felt a lump in her throat. She knew she had made a terrible mistake, but she didn't know how to fix it. She thought about the soldier and how she had misjudged him. She wished she could go back and handle the situation differently, but it was too late. As she sat in that small room, waiting for what would happen next, the woman realized that her life would never be the same. She had always been so confident, so sure of herself. But now, she felt lost and unsure of what the future held. She knew that this incident would follow her, and that her career, the thing she had worked so hard for, could be over in an instant. But even in that moment of despair, she couldn't help but think about the soldier. She wondered if he was okay, if he had gotten the help he needed. She wished she could apologize to him, to explain that she hadn't meant to hurt him. But she knew that some things couldn't be undone. As the hours passed, the woman's mind was filled with regret and fear. She knew that the next few days would be difficult, and that she would have to face the consequences of her actions. But she also knew that she had to find a way to move forward, to learn from this experience and become a better person. And as she sat there, waiting for what would come next, she couldn't help but wonder if she would ever get the chance to make things right. The night dragged on at the police station. The woman sat in the small, dimly lit room, her mind racing with thoughts of what had happened and what was to come. She had never been in trouble with the law before, and the weight of the situation was crushing her. The officer had told her that she would likely face charges for brandishing a weapon, and the thought of a criminal record terrified her. Her career, her reputation, everything she had built, was now hanging by a thread. As she waited, she replayed the incident in her mind over and over again. She thought about the soldier, his calm demeanor, and how she had completely misjudged him. She had let her fear take over, and now she was paying the price. She wondered if he had gotten the help he needed, or if her actions had made things worse for him. The guilt was overwhelming, and she wished she could turn back time. After what felt like hours, the door to the room opened, and a different officer walked in. He was older, with a kind but serious expression. He introduced himself as the sergeant and sat down across from her. "I've reviewed the situation," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And I've spoken to the soldier. He's not pressing charges, but that doesn't mean you're off the hook. Brandishing a weapon is a serious offense, and we can't just let this go." The woman nodded, her eyes downcast. "I understand," she said softly. I made a terrible mistake. I was scared, and I overreacted. I didn't mean to hurt anyone." The sergeant studied her for a moment, then sighed. "I believe you," he said. "But you need to understand the gravity of what you did. That man is a soldier who has served our country. He was just asking for help, and you pulled a gun on him. Do you realize how that looks?" The woman felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I do," she whispered. "And I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I've never done anything like this before." The sergeant leaned back in his chair, his expression softening slightly. "Look," he said, "I'm going to be honest with you. If this goes to court, you could face serious consequences. But given that this is your first offense and the soldier isn't pressing charges, we might be able to work something out." The woman looked up, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Community service," the sergeant replied. "And maybe some anger management or counseling. If you agree to those terms, we might be able to avoid formal charges. But you'll have to prove that you're willing to take responsibility for your actions." The woman nodded eagerly. "I'll do anything," she said. "I just want to make this right." The sergeant gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Good," he said. "I'll talk to the prosecutor and see what we can do. In the meantime, you're free to go. But don't leave town, and stay out of trouble. We'll be in touch." The woman thanked him, her voice trembling with relief. As she left the police station, the cool night air hit her face, and she took a deep breath. She felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, guilt, and a lingering sense of fear. She knew that this wasn't over, but at least she had a chance to make things right. When she got home, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind still racing. She thought about the soldier again and how she had treated him. She knew she needed to apologize, but she didn't know how to find him. She didn't even know his name. The next morning, she decided to take action. She called her boss and explained what had happened, leaving out some of the more incriminating details. She told him she needed some time off to deal with a personal matter, and to her surprise, he agreed. She knew she was lucky to have a supportive employer, but she also knew that her job was still at risk. If word got out about what had happened, it could ruin her career. After hanging up the phone, she got dressed and headed to the local veteran center. She didn't know if the soldier would be there, but she hoped someone might be able to help her find him. When she arrived, she was greeted by a friendly volunteer who listened to her story. "I'm looking for a soldier I had an encounter with last night," she explained, her voice shaking. "I need to apologize to him. I made a terrible mistake, and I want to make it right." The volunteer nodded sympathetically. "We get a lot of soldiers coming through here," she said. "Can you describe him?" The woman did her best to describe the soldier, and the volunteer promised to ask around. "It might take some time," she said. "But if he's a regular, someone here might know him." The woman thanked her and left her contact information. As she walked back to her car, she felt a small sense of hope. She knew that finding the soldier wouldn't erase what she had done, but it was a step in the right direction. Over the next few days, the woman threw herself into her community service. She volunteered at a local food bank, helping to pack boxes for families in need. It was hard work, but it gave her a sense of purpose. She also started attending counseling sessions, where she talked about her fear and how it had led to her actions that night. It wasn't easy, but she knew she had to face her emotions if she wanted to grow. As the days passed, she began to feel a little stronger. She knew she still had a long way to go, but she was determined to make things right. And deep down, she hoped that one day, she would get the chance to apologize to the soldier and truly make amends. A week had passed since the incident, and the woman was slowly trying to piece her life back together. The weight of what she had done still hung over her, but she was determined to move forward. Her days were now filled with community service, counseling sessions, and moments of quiet reflection. She hadn't heard anything from the Veterans Center about the soldier, but she hadn't given up hope. She knew that finding him and apologizing was something she needed to do, not just for him, but for herself. One afternoon, as she was sorting donations at the food bank, her phone buzzed. It was a call from the Veterans Center. Her heart skipped a beat as she answered. "Hello?" she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hi, it's the volunteer from the Veteran Center," the voice on the other end said. "We think we might have found the soldier you're looking for. He's been coming here for the past few days, and your description matches him. Would you like to come by and see if it's him?" The woman's hands trembled as she gripped the phone. "Yes, absolutely," she said quickly. "I'll be there as soon as I can." She finished her shift at the food bank and drove straight to the Veteran Center. Her mind was racing with thoughts of what she would say to the soldier. How could she possibly apologize for what she had done? Would he even want to see her? She didn't know, but she knew she had to try. When she arrived, the volunteer greeted her with a warm smile. "He's in the lounge area," she said, pointing down the hall. "Take your time. And good luck." The woman nodded, her throat dry. She walked slowly down the hall, her heart pounding in her chest. When she reached the lounge, she paused at the doorway. There he was, sitting on a couch, reading a book. He looked just as calm and composed as he had that night in the parking lot. She took a deep breath and stepped into the room. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The soldier looked up, and for a moment, there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He didn't say anything, just waited for her to continue. I don't know if you remember me," she began, her voice shaking. "But I'm the woman from the parking lot. The one who pulled a gun on you." The soldier nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I remember," he said simply. The woman felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I was scared, and I made a terrible mistake. I didn't mean to hurt you or make you feel threatened. I've been thinking about it every day since it happened, and I needed to apologize." The soldier studied her for a moment, then set his book aside. "I appreciate that," he said. "But why now? Why come here to say this?" The woman swallowed hard. "Because I needed to take responsibility for what I did," she said. "I've been doing community service and going to counseling to try to understand why I acted the way I did. But none of that matters if I don't apologize to you. I was wrong, and I'm truly sorry." The soldier nodded again, his expression softening. "Apology accepted," he said. "But I hope you've learned from this. Fear can make us do things we regret, but it's how we move forward that matters." The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I have," she said. "And I'm trying to be better. Thank you for giving me the chance to say this." The soldier gave her a small smile. "Take care of yourself," he said. "And good luck." The woman left the Veteran Center that day with a heavy heart but also a sense of relief. She knew she still had a long road ahead, but she had taken the first step toward making things right. And for now, that was enough. After her encounter with the soldier, the woman felt a strange mix of emotions. There was relief in having apologized, but also a lingering sadness. She had faced the consequences of her actions, but the weight of what she had done still haunted her. She knew she couldn't change the past, but she was determined to use this experience as a turning point in her life. Over the next few weeks, she threw herself into her community service and counseling sessions with even more dedication. She began to understand how fear and stress had clouded her judgment that night, and she worked on finding healthier ways to cope with those emotions. It wasn't easy, but she was making progress. She also started volunteering at the Veteran Center, hoping to give back in some small way. It felt like the right thing to do, especially after everything that had happened. One day, while helping organize a charity event at the center, she ran into the soldier again. He was helping set up tables, and when he saw her, he gave her a small nod of acknowledgement. She hesitated for a moment, then walked over to him. "Hi," she said, her voice tentative. I just wanted to say thank you again for accepting my apology. It meant a lot to me." The soldier smiled faintly. "You're welcome," he said. "I can see you're trying to make things right. That's what matters." The woman nodded, feeling a small sense of validation. "I'm trying," she said. "I know I can't undo what happened, but I want to be better. For myself, and for others." The soldier studied her for a moment, then said, "You know, fear can do strange things to people. I've seen it in the military, and I've seen it in everyday life. What's important is how you handle it afterward. You're doing the right thing by facing it head-on." His words struck a chord with her. She realized that she wasn't the only one who had struggled with fear and its consequences. It was a universal experience, and she wasn't alone in trying to overcome it. As they worked together that day, the woman and the soldier talked more. She learned that he had served multiple tours overseas and had faced his own share of challenges. He didn't go into too much detail, but she could sense the weight of his experiences. In turn, she shared more about her own journey, how she had always been driven by her career, how she had let stress and fear control her, and how she was now trying to rebuild her life. By the end of the day, the woman felt a sense of connection she hadn't expected. She realized that the soldier wasn't just someone she had wronged, he was also someone who had shown her kindness and understanding when she least deserved it. It was a humbling realization, and it deepened her respect for him. As she left the center that evening, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew she still had a long way to go, but she was on the right path. She had faced her mistakes, apologized, and was working to become a better person. And for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful about the future. But she also knew that her journey wasn't over. There were still challenges ahead, and she would need to stay strong. She was ready to face them, one step at a time. The woman's life began to settle into a new rhythm. Her days were filled with work, community service, and volunteering at the Veteran Center. She found a strange sense of peace in the routine, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was living with purpose rather than just chasing success. The soldier's words about facing fear head-on stayed with her, and she tried to apply that mindset to every aspect of her life. One evening, as she was leaving the Veteran Center, she noticed a flyer on the bulletin board. It was for a fundraising event to support soldiers transitioning back to civilian life. The event was a few weeks away, and they were looking for volunteers to help organize it. Without hesitation, she signed up. It felt like the perfect opportunity to give back in a meaningful way. Over the next few weeks, she poured her energy into planning the event. She worked closely with the center's staff and even reached out to local businesses for donations and sponsorships. It was a lot of work, but she enjoyed it. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. As the event approached, she couldn't help but feel a little nervous. She had never organized something on this scale before, and she wanted everything to go perfectly. On the day of the event, she arrived early to help set up. The venue was a community hall, and it was already buzzing with activity. Volunteers were arranging tables, setting up decorations, and preparing for the evening ahead. The soldier was there too, helping with the setup. When he saw her, he gave her a small smile. "You've been working hard on this," he said. "It looks great." The woman felt a surge of pride. "Thank you," she said. "I just hope it goes well." The soldier nodded. "It will. You've put a lot of effort into it, and it shows." As the evening began, the hall filled with people. There were soldiers, their families, and members of the community who had come to show their support. The woman moved through the crowd, making sure everything was running smoothly. She felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in a long time. During the event, there was a moment when the soldier took the stage to share a few words. He talked about the challenges of transitioning back to civilian life and how important it was to have support from the community. His words were heartfelt and resonated with everyone in the room. When he finished speaking, the woman felt a lump in her throat. She realized how much she had learned from him, not just about forgiveness, but about resilience and the importance of community. She approached him after he stepped off the stage. "Your speech was amazing," she said. "It really touched me." The soldier smiled. "Thank you," he said. "I meant what I said. We all need support sometimes, and it's important to give back when we can." The woman nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I'm glad I could be a part of this," she said. "It's been a learning experience for me." The soldier looked at her for a moment, then said, "You've come a long way. I'm proud of you." His words meant more to her than he could possibly know. They were a reminder that she was on the right path, and that her efforts to change and grow were making a difference. As the event came to an end, the woman felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt in years. She knew she still had a lot to learn, but she was ready to keep moving forward. And for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful about the future. The success of the fundraising event marked a turning point for the woman. It wasn't just the praise she received from the Veteran Center staff or the community, it was the realization that she could make a positive impact on others' lives. For so long, her focus had been on her career and personal success, but now she saw the value in giving back. It gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. In the weeks that followed, she became even more involved at the Veteran Center. She helped organize workshops, assisted with job placement programs, and even started mentoring a young veteran who was struggling to adjust to civilian life. It was challenging work, but it was also deeply rewarding. She found herself looking forward to her time at the center, and it became a cornerstone of her new routine. One day, as she was helping with a resume writing workshop, the soldier approached her. "You've really found your place here," he said, his tone warm but matter-of-fact. "It's good to see." The woman smiled, feeling a flicker of pride. "Thank you," she said. "I feel like I'm finally doing something that matters. And it's all thanks to you." The soldier raised an eyebrow. "Me?" "Yes," she said. "If it weren't for what happened that night, and the way you handled it, I don't think I would have ended up here. You showed me kindness when I didn't deserve it, and it made me want to be better." The soldier nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes, people just need a second chance," he said. "I'm glad you took yours." Their conversation was interrupted by one of the workshop participants, and the woman returned to her tasks. But the soldier's words stayed with her. They were a reminder of how far she had come and how much she still had to learn. As the months passed, the woman's life continued to change. She still worked her regular job, but her priorities had shifted. She no longer measured her worth by her career achievements alone. Instead, she focused on the impact she could have on others. It wasn't always easy, there were days when she felt overwhelmed or doubted herself, but she kept going. One evening, as she was leaving the Veteran Center, she ran into the soldier again. He was carrying a box of supplies, and she offered to help him. As they walked together, he asked, "Do you ever think about that night? About what happened?" The woman paused, then nodded. "All the time," she admitted. "It's something I'll never forget. But I've learned to see it differently now. It's not just a mistake I made, it's a lesson I needed to learn." The soldier smiled faintly. "That's a good way to look at it," he said. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do afterward." The woman nodded, feeling a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. "Thank you," she said. "For everything." The soldier shrugged. "You did the work," he said. "I just gave you a nudge." As they parted ways that evening, the woman felt a deep sense of gratitude. She knew her journey wasn't over, but she was no longer afraid of the road ahead. She had faced her fears, owned her mistakes, and was working to become a better person. And for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. The woman's involvement at the Veterans Center continued to grow, and so did her confidence. She no longer felt like the person who had made that terrible mistake months ago. Instead, she felt like someone who had learned from it and was using that lesson to help others. Her days were busy, but fulfilling, and she found joy in the small moments, like seeing a veteran land a job or watching someone open up during a counseling session. One afternoon, as she was organizing a donation drive at the center, she received a call from her boss. She hadn't spoken to him much since taking time off, and her stomach tightened as she answered the phone. "Hi," she said, trying to sound calm. "What's up?" Her boss's voice was warm but serious. "I wanted to talk to you about something," he said. "We've noticed the work you've been doing at the Veterans Center, and we're impressed. We think it aligns with some of the company's values, and we'd like to explore ways to support your efforts. Maybe even make it an official part of your role here." The woman was stunned. She hadn't expected this. "Really?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. That would be amazing." Her boss chuckled. "You've been doing great work, and we want to recognize that. Let's set up a meeting to discuss the details." When she hung up the phone, the woman felt a rush of emotions, excitement, relief, and a deep sense of validation. She had been so focused on making amends and helping others that she hadn't considered how it might impact her career. Now, it seemed like her two worlds were coming together in a way she never could have imagined. That evening, she shared the news with the soldier during one of their casual conversations at the center. He listened intently, then smiled. "That's great," he said. "It sounds like things are coming full circle for you." The woman nodded. "It feels that way," she said. "But I also feel like I have a responsibility to keep doing this work, not just for my career, but because it's the right thing to do." The soldier's expression grew thoughtful. "You've come a long way," he said. "And I think you're just getting started." His words stayed with her as she prepared for the meeting with her boss. She spent hours drafting ideas for how her company could support the Veterans Center and other community initiatives. She wanted to make sure her proposal was thoughtful and impactful, not just a publicity stunt. When the day of the meeting arrived, she walked into the conference room feeling nervous but determined. Her boss and a few other executives were there, and they listened carefully as she presented her ideas. She talked about the importance of supporting veterans, the impact it could have on the community, and how it aligned with the company's values. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then her boss smiled. "This is exactly the kind of initiative we want to support," he said. "Let's make it happen." The woman felt a surge of pride and gratitude. She had turned what could have been a career-ending mistake into an opportunity to make a real difference. And as she left the meeting, she knew that this was just the beginning. With her company's support, the woman's efforts at the Veterans Center took on a new level of impact. What had started as a personal journey of redemption had now become a full-fledged initiative, with resources and backing that allowed her to expand her work. She helped launch a mentorship program pairing veterans with professionals in her industry, organized fundraising events, and even spearheaded a campaign to raise awareness about the challenges soldiers face when transitioning to civilian life. The soldier continued to be a quiet but steady presence in her life. He didn't say much, but his occasional words of encouragement meant the world to her. One day, as they were setting up for a workshop, he turned to her and said, "You've turned something negative into something positive. Not many people can do that." The woman smiled, feeling a swell of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "You gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve one." The soldier shook his head. "You gave yourself that chance," he said. "I just pointed you in the right direction." His humility only deepened her respect for him. She realized that he, too, had faced his own struggles and had found a way to move forward. It was a reminder that everyone has their battles, and that kindness and understanding can go a long way. As the months passed, the woman's life continued to evolve. Her work at the Veterans Center became a central part of her identity, and she found a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. She still had moments of doubt and fear, but she had learned to face them head-on, just as the soldier had taught her. One evening, as she was leaving the center, she ran into the soldier one last time. He was carrying a duffel bag and had a determined look on his face. "I'm heading out," he said. "Got a new assignment." The woman felt a pang of sadness. She had grown used to seeing him around, and the thought of him leaving was bittersweet. "I'll miss having you here," she said. "But I'm happy for you. You deserve this." The soldier nodded. "Thanks," he said. "And don't stop what you're doing. You're making a real difference." The woman smiled, feeling a lump in her throat. "I won't," she said. "And thank you for everything." The soldier gave her a small salute, then turned and walked away. As she watched him go, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had been a pivotal figure in her journey, and she knew she would always carry his lessons with her. As she drove home that evening, the woman reflected on how far she had come. She had faced her fears, owned her mistakes, and turned her life around. She had found a new sense of purpose and had made a positive impact on others. And while she knew her journey wasn't over, she felt ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. She had learned that life wasn't about avoiding mistakes, but about how you responded to them. And she was proud of the person she had become. The woman's life settled into a new rhythm, one that felt balanced and meaningful. Her work at the Veterans Center continued to thrive, and her company's support allowed her to expand the programs she had started. She found joy in seeing the impact of her efforts, veterans finding jobs, families receiving support, and the community coming together to make a difference. It was a far cry from the life she had lived before, and she wouldn't have had it any other way. Though the soldier had moved on, his influence remained. She often thought about his quiet strength and the lessons he had taught her. His words about facing fear and taking responsibility had become a guiding principle in her life. She carried them with her, not just in her work at the center, but in her everyday interactions. One day, as she was organizing a fundraiser, a young woman approached her. She was a new volunteer, nervous and unsure of herself. "I'm not sure if I'm doing this right," the woman admitted, looking down at the stack of flyers in her hands. The woman smiled, recognizing the familiar uncertainty. "You're doing great," she said. "And if you make a mistake, that's okay. What matters is that you're here, trying to help." The young woman looked up, relief washing over her face. "Thank you," she said. "I just want to make a difference." The woman nodded, feeling a sense of déjà vu. "You will," she said. "Just keep showing up." As the fundraiser unfolded, the woman watched the young volunteer grow more confident. It was a small moment, but it reminded her of how far she had come. She had once been that unsure, that afraid of making mistakes. But now, she was the one offering encouragement, the one helping others find their way. That evening, as she packed up after the event, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had turned a moment of fear and regret into a life of purpose and connection. She had faced her mistakes, learned from them, and used those lessons to help others. And while she knew there would always be challenges ahead, she felt ready to face them. As she drove home, she thought about the soldier and the impact he had had on her life. She wished she could thank him one more time, but she knew he was out there, doing what he did best, serving others. She hoped he knew how much he had helped her, how his kindness had changed the course of her life. When she got home, she sat down and wrote a letter. It wasn't to the soldier, she didn't know where to send it, but to herself. She wrote about her journey, the mistakes she had made, and the lessons she had learned. She wrote about the importance of facing fear, taking responsibility, and finding purpose in helping others. And she wrote about gratitude, for the soldier, for the Veterans Center, and for the chance to start over. When she finished, she folded the letter and put it in a drawer. It was a reminder of how far she had come and a promise to keep moving forward. She knew her journey wasn't over, but she was ready for whatever came next. As she lay in bed that night, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had turned a moment of darkness into a life of light. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly at home in herself.